Oh, wrong screen. Hang on. There we go. Hello. Let me get our music back. I thought I'd play some more upbeat music today since we are doing the um, mini stories, some more lighthearted stories. Maybe I'll turn it down a little more. I hope you're well. We are on the the last 5 stories of Magical Girl Raising Project, Book 4. Oh, hello! And thank you. I hope your day goes well too. Oh. Slurp and a stretch. Oh, and a pet the pet. I love Justin on the corner of the couch here. Yeah. So after today, we'll be done with book 4. And we'll get to start a new arc. Maybe I'll turn up the music a teeny bit. I hope that's good. So this story is called Night on the Day of the Offline Meetup. The story is set a few months before the competition for magical candy and Magical Girl Raising Project begins. An offkai, an offline meetup, a gathering where people who knew one another through online chat, message boards, or MMORPGs eat, drink, sing, chat, and hang out in real life. He'd thought about going to a meetup more than just once or twice. So Takishibe had a secret love of magical girls. So the chat board on the general fan site was the one place where he could loudly proclaim his love for them. The general magical girl site, Magi Magi Cow Cow, covered media from every possible source on the topic, and it had a message board boasting the largest number of posts not only among magical girls sites, but among all anime sites, as well as a great variety of threads. He knew all the regulars on this message board, as well as who liked which shows, which characters, and which sorts of stories. Sometimes they'd fight over the theories behind the works. Other times they'd debate interpretations, pore over magical girl history, or talk about their passions to make one another into better fans. Every time a meetup was planned, and then actually happened, Sota would read the reports with a sober eye. Well, aren't they cozy? Sometimes he'd think, if they want to talk, they could just do it in chat or on the message board. But at the same time, he'd also think, oh, they look like they're having fun. Or, if I'd been there, I wondered what we could have talked about. Sota had signed copies of the first edition Cutie Healer manga. He had the gold version of the PlayStation edition of Star Queen. He had the Hyoko transformation set, which had quickly ended up recalled due to numerous people getting their fingers stuck in the joint parts. Other people who had shared his interests would understand the value of these rare items, and he wanted to brag about them. In his real life, he didn't have anyone he could even admit it to, never mind bragging. Sota was in his second year of middle school. This was the age where kids were most concerned about image. The whirlpool of values he lived among told him nothing was worse than being uncool. To make it worse, Sota was in the soccer club. He had always been a jock, and the current captain of the soccer club in particular was the hardline jock type, who would mock indoor types at every chance with comments like, "Why the glasses count in the science club so high?" And these days, the whole soccer club had basically become like that. Hi, Fuki! Welcome. Sota just went with the flow and basically ignored it. But he didn't even want to think about what would happen if they found out he liked magical girls. Some of the guys in the club liked anime and manga, but even those otaku boys weren't purely devoted to magical girls like Sota was. The eyes of the world would surely be kinder if he were into shonen manga and similar interests, but not with this. The world would only perceive him as a creep, panting over underage animated girls. To Sota Kishibe, being exposed as a magical girl fan was basically social suicide. Otaku, yeah. I did not say otaku. I said otaku, didn't I? Maybe otaku is just ingrained in my mind now if I said it. It's your fault if I said it. He absolutely could not let this secret get out. This was the first reason he couldn't go into any meetups. If he went, someone he knew would see him and ask, "Huh? Kishibe, what are you doing here? What kind of meetup is this?" And if he failed to come up with a good lie, from the next day forward, he could be sure there would be no place for him at school. There was one more reason. On the site, Sota had lied about his sex. He was a so-called GIRL guy in real life. He wasn't trying to catfish anyone, and it wasn't like he had any twisted desires, as far as he could tell. He just settled down into the position without even realizing it, and at some point, he was pegged as a woman, and everyone had ended up calling him sis. Maybe it was because of his username, Magical Girly. Sota had heard plenty of funny stories about a girl meeting someone at a meetup and finding out it was a middle-aged man, but he'd never imagined that person being himself. He was not bold enough to join in with a laugh. "Well, I'm actually a boy in middle school." He was actually on the sensitive side in his pubescent way. In real life, he hid his interests, and on the internet, he couldn't talk freely about everything. He walked the path of a lonely fan. And it was at that stage, 6 months earlier, when Sota had encountered the mobile game Magical Girl Raising Project. He had become a real magical girl about 2 weeks ago. There had been rumors about the game, saying that people who played it could acquire real magical powers. However, Sota hadn't been playing the game with that expectation in mind. Since he wasn't a girl, even if he were to get magical powers, he'd looked like a total disgrace. He could predict just about how it would go by imagining himself cosplaying as Cutie Healer or Star Queen. Enjoying a game was one thing, but becoming a real magical girl, or in this case, a magical boy, was just not an option. Sota just had a pure interest in enjoying the game. As a fan, designing his ideal magical girl had to be fun. But then he'd done it. He became a magical girl. I can't do this. I do like magical girls, but it's not like I want to be one myself.
Well, that's a problem for us, Poon. A boy magical girl is such a rare find.
It's not a rare find. Oh, wait. There's no demand for it.
There certainly is, Poon.
No, there's not.
Oh, there is, Poon.
No.
This is getting annoying, so could you just look in the mirror, Poon?
Gross.
How can you be so stubborn about this when you readily accepted that magical girls are real, Poon?
I mean, they are real. They actually exist.
Hey, you get a lot of people telling you don't listen, Poon. I mean, notice your own voice already.
Of course you can be a magical girl, Fuki. Anyone can be a magical girl. After that, Fav made a dedicated attempt to persuade him, and Sota did look in the mirror, find out about his magical powers, and conduct his own examination to confirm that he had already actually become a girl. And so Sota Kishibe accepted the identity of the magical girl La Pucelle. Magical girls, Ever since kindergarten, when Sota had first watched an anime about them with his childhood friend, they had captivated him with their big dreams, mysterious magic, hard work to make people happy, and sometimes battles against evil. Now he had become one. For his first week as a magical girl, he was incredibly busy. He was only using his spare time to help people, so he couldn't be that busy, but he just wasn't used to it. All the various tasks he had to do, like networking with senior magical girls and keeping his identity hidden as he helped people, were mentally exhausting. However, after that week, he started getting the hang of it. It became part of his daily routine to sneak out of his bedroom window at night to go search the town for people in trouble, help them out, earn candy, and then return in the morning. When you get used to things, you gain some extra time, and once you've got extra time, you end up thinking too much. Sota had believed a boy like him could never become a magical girl, so he'd been wildly overjoyed to become one, but with some time, that had cooled down a bit. Now that he'd regained some calm, he thought that perhaps he could use this power for ill. The first thought that came to his mind was, I could be a robber and absolutely never get caught. But then he panicked and erased that thought. It wasn't like such a thing had never happened in slapstick magical girl gag manga, but for a real heroine, engaging in criminal activity was inexcusable. In the Cutie Healer series, Dark Cutie had once attacked a bank, but that had ultimately been the act of a villain. There was another one called Baby Crown, which featured a phantom thief who stole things with magic, but that was a different character type from the pure, noble knight La Pucelle. Having reached the conclusion that theft was bad, the next thing Sota thought about as he lay in bed was, if I transform, I could get into the woman's bath. And then he felt ashamed of his own pettiness for coming up with that idea, but even as he was ashamed, he took that thought one step further. If he were to transform, then couldn't he go to an offline meetup? There were two reasons he hadn't been able to go before. One, if someone he knew happened to see him, he'd be in trouble, and two, he'd been lying about his sex online. But both of those problems would be solved by transforming into La Pucelle, right? He might be able to go to a meetup, just like he always wanted. With that thought, he looked at La Pucelle's figure, reflected in the mirror. She had horns. That was a problem. Normal people didn't have those. She also had a tail, another wrench in the works. As he had tweaked things here and there in creating his ideal avatar, he had added dragon-like elements to a plain knight, resulting in this. But if he could hide these two things, couldn't he go to the meetup? Sota de-transformed and booted up his computer. The next one would already have been scheduled. He checked the date and time of the upcoming event in the meetup thread on Magi Magi Cow Cow. It was exactly 1 week away, Sunday. And it's today. Maybe the meetup's today. It would be at a family restaurant in the city. The plan was apparently to go into the restaurant in the afternoon and then head off to a second and then third location in the evening. I want to go. Thinking about how he might be able to do it really made him want to join. He wanted to talk about magical girls. He wanted to chat. He wanted to argue pet theories with the others. He wanted to brag. Oh, and he'd heard that the last time they had planned some kind of magical girl niche trivia tournament. How far could he go with his knowledge? Even if he couldn't win, he could rank pretty high up there, couldn't he? He couldn't even sit still thinking about all this. Before he knew it, he'd sneaked in a message on the meetup thread saying he wanted to go.
So, Magical Girly is coming. First time? I'm glad Magical Girly's coming.
Sota got these kinds of comments in response to his declaration he would go. There was no backing out now. He had no choice but to steel himself and go to the meetup. He would transform into La Pucelle, take off his magical girl costume, change clothes, and pretend to be your everyday, average girl, then head out to the meetup. That was the strategy he had come up with. The horns and tails would be in the tail would be in the way, so he would hide them. I can just hide the horns under a knit cap, or so he'd thought, but they turned out to be longer than he'd figured, and poked right through. The cap was no good. He needed a real hat, one that was as tall as possible, too. Then he could hide the horns. Sota looked. He didn't have anything like that. He could borrow one. There was no one for him to borrow it from. None of his friends or acquaintances were the fashionable types. He would have a lot of hats. And since he was an only child, he had no siblings to lend him anything, so he couldn't count on his mom or dad either. If he asked any of the girls in his class or that girl who was his childhood friend, "Hey, can I borrow a hat?" they might treat him like a pervert. Sister Nana, the senior magical girl he knew, might have a hat like that, but still, how could he ask her for one? If he were to tell her he wanted it to hide his horns, he'd obviously be forced to admit his reason for hiding them. His pure and noble image as a knight would crumble, and Sister Nana would feel sorry for him, mock him, or condescend to him, and he didn't want any of those reactions. He could wrap a towel around them like a turban, or harden his hair with wax to hide the horns, or wear a veil like Sister Nana's. None of these ideas really felt quite right. Should he give up on the meetup? But he had a feeling that if he bailed now, he'd never be able to go to another for the rest of his life. Sota opened up his short wallet and pulled out the cash card tucked inside. On that card was money for a new pair of soccer cleats. He'd scrimped and saved for this, tucking it away slowly, bit by bit, from his allowance, from New Year's money, and from the little extra his mom gave him when she got him to go shopping for her. Sota looked at the card. Now he was standing at a crossroads. Down one path was magical girls. Down the other was soccer. Both of these things occupied important positions in Sota's life. But he had to choose. He couldn't pick one. He didn't have enough savings for that right now. Hello, Queen of Nerds. How are you doing? Sota chose magical girls. Oh, thank you. I'm doing pretty well. I'm glad to hear you're well. Soccer was important to him. He still hadn't abandoned his dream of becoming a pro and playing in Europe. But at the current point in time, he was already a pro magical girl, so he should prioritize that, probably. He used a seasonal discount ticket to connect between limited express trains until he reached Tokyo Station, which was so big it made his head spin. Multiple times, he had to ask a station employee about which platform to go to, and after a number of stops, he arrived at his goal. He was wearing a hat called a cloak, or a cloche, which hung down his whole head to cover his horns, and he could pull it down to hide everything above his eyes. The shape of his lower body he concealed with an ankle-length skirt that flared out. This kept his tail under wraps. He'd bought all these things from the neighborhood department store, so there was no helping the overall cheap-looking aesthetic, but it did work more or less. Underwear was the one thing he just couldn't bring himself to buy, so he used La Pucelle's costume, as is, for that. He'd come from his house to Tokyo in this outfit. He wanted to believe that the occasional glances he got were not because he looked weird. He was pretty sure there were only a few minor things about him that were off, like the mismatched look with his sneakers and travel backpack, and how the size of the sneakers were a bit wrong, making him walk sort of funny. Maybe I should have gotten changed somewhere after all. He'd thought about going into some bathroom to get changed, but it would be weird if Sota Kishibe were to go into the bathroom and then come out as La Pucelle. He was sure the best way to do it was to wait for the moment when both his parents were out of the house, transform, and then sneak out so that no one would see him. Such worries had plagued Sota on the way as he was rocked on the train. But when he arrived at the family restaurant that was the venue for the meetup, he found a number of people who looked like they'd come for the event, had arrived and were chatting pleasantly. He recognized the words they were using. When he approached the group, they all suddenly went quiet and looked at La Pucelle. Nervous, he bowed his head. Is this the meetup?
Yes, it is.
Nice to meet you. I'm Magical Girly.
Oh, you're Magical Girly?
Wow, you're just like I imagined. You startled me. You've got such nice skin. The welcome made him breathe a sigh of relief. He shuffled to a seat among the group and sat down. If the captain of his soccer club had been there, he would have said to the crowd, "The glasses count here is way too high." But they were the people Sota most wanted to see right then. This family restaurant was no different from the branch in his hometown, and their corner of it had become a gathering spot for magical girl talk. So this is a meetup, Sota thought, heart pounding.
Hello, I'm Genopsycho.
Oh, you're Genopsycho? Thanks so much for all you've done for us. Genopsycho is a central figure on the message board. She was a somewhat round young woman. She was basically what Sota had imagined. She gave him a beaming smile as she reached out to a large serving of fries.
I thought you were the type who wouldn't come to these things, Magical Girly. You're really pretty.
Oh, not at all.
You're not in the business, are you? You got the face and the body type and the vibe.
Pardon?
Oh, if you don't get what I'm talking about, then please don't worry about it. I wish Pellet would have come. Then we'd have the full set of regulars.
Does Pellet not come to meetups?
They've never come before.
Genopsycho's voice got quieter, and she leaned in toward La Pucelle.
I think they're probably someone from the production side. If they were to show their face here, some of us would recognize them, so they can't go to meetups. That sort of deal.
Oh, that sort of deal.
Pellet was another regular on the message board who knew even more about magical girls than Sota did.
They were a big fan of Magical Daisy in particular, and a certain post of theirs, beginning with the line, "Magical Daisy is over, and so is my youth," had become a meme. This tidbit from Genopsycho kind of sounded like gossip, but it also had a subtly realistic edge to it. Sota felt like Pellet had often talked about behind-the-scenes stuff, like interference from sponsors, the relationship between voice actors, and company plans, mostly in relation to Magical Daisy. Even people in the anime business comment on the message boards and stuff, huh?
I heard there's a bunch of people, and then there's me.
Huh? You're in the business too, Genopsycho?
Oh, I can't really answer that question.
Sota moved around to many different seats, introducing himself over and over and chatting. You're not playing Magical Girl Raising Project, Panosa?
I've heard about it, but I just can't bring myself to be interested.
Seems like there aren't many people in Tokyo playing it.
It's unusual for a mobile game to be popular in just one particular region, isn't it? From what I've heard, it seems interesting, but for some reason, I just can't get excited about it. It's strange. It's a Magical Girl game, so there's no way I wouldn't want to play it. And it's free, too, right? It's just weird that I'm not into it. I really don't get it. Maybe it's age.
Talking to people, he started to see a little of what their relationships were like, too.
Watch out for Misoyaki, one girl said.
Oh?
He gets a little too excited around cute girls.
Sota glanced over at Mr. Misoyaki. He was a man with a rather unique sense of fashion. He wore a brand name summer jacket paired with a fan that had the 4 characters of Magical Girl written on it in elegant grass script. His beard was vaguely sketchy looking.
I think we should just ban him, but Genopsycho is lenient when it comes to this stuff.
Oh, I'll be careful. Sota glanced over at Mr. Misoyaki one more time, and their eyes met. When he gave a little nod, the guy smirked and stood up. Maybe he meant to come over here. Having just been told to watch out for him, this felt a little awkward. Maybe it'd be better to head this off. Sota said, "Pardon me," as he cut through the crowd with a slicing hand and switched to another seat. Nice to meet you. I'm Magical Girly. He introduced himself with a smile, but the girl sitting beside him just gave a little head bob. Um... The girl was looking at La Pucelle with a slightly confused expression. It seemed he was making her uncomfortable, which made him uncomfortable. He grasped for a conversation starter, but she wouldn't get into any talk about magical girls, or the message board, or even the weather that day. She just nodded or tilted her head and didn't reply. What do you think about that show? Good thing it's sunny today. Magical girls are great, huh?
Yeah.
That was the only word he got from her, their whole conversation. After that, Sota asked Genopsycho, who is she? But Genopsycho shook her head and shrugged.
I don't know. Maybe some newbie? I mean, anyone can come if they pay for entry.
He was just curious about the girl somehow. She continued to eat alone in silence without participating in the conversation. Something about her reminded Sota of his childhood friend. It wasn't like their faces were similar, and this girl was quiet and timid, which wasn't really like his friend either. Maybe it was her vibe. Sota was curious, but he didn't have any more time to spend with her. After chatting up a storm about magical girls, bragging about the rare items he'd bought wrapped in packing material, playing magical girl word games, getting some souvenirs, then regretting he hadn't brought things to give out too, and gently rejecting guys who were giving him too many compliments on his looks, it was time for his train. There were still so many things he wanted to talk about, and he was curious about the after parties, but he had to go home now or his parents would get there before he did. If he got home as La Pucelle and ran into his parents, it'd be a catastrophe. But if he got changed in some bathroom on his way home, he would be forced to walk out of the girl's side, and that would be a catastrophe too. I had a really fun day today. I really had fun today, he told everyone.
I had a great time too. See you on the boards. We'll have more meetups, so I hope to see you then too. Let's chat about the new cutie healer.
As Sota was leaving, he glanced at the silent girl. She was looking at him, and though it was very faint, she smiled. Feeling vaguely pleased, Sota left the family restaurant. There were places he wanted to stop by and things he wanted to see, but Sota didn't have the time. Telling himself he'd see the sights of Tokyo another time, he checked the path to the station on his map. Figured it would be faster to cut through a back alley. In about 5 minutes of walking, someone tapped his shoulder from behind. He turned around, surprised. Hey, where are you going? It was Mr. Misoyaki. He was wearing really big sunglasses that he hadn't used inside the restaurant, making him seem even more suspicious. Why? You're asking why I'm here? Well, I can't let a girl walk back alone, right? No, I'm okay. Don't be shy. He wasn't being shy, but it didn't seem this guy would listen. Hey, before you go back, why don't I show you around the area? I live in Tokyo, so I know the place, you know? Even Sota, a middle school kid, could put together this guy's reputation, attitude, and expression to figure out he wanted something. But Sota had no interest at all in giving him what he was after. No, I have to make my train. It'll be fine. I have to go home. Going home? That's no fun. That's not the issue. Let's go out to eat somewhere nice, not just a family restaurant. What do you like, French or Italian? Sota couldn't hit the guy, but it didn't seem like he would shut up and listen either. Sota could turn around and head to the station, but the guy might keep on following him anyway, and that would really suck. Sota had never in his life experienced a man persistently trying to hit on him. Of course, he'd never thought about what he might do in this situation either. His heart started racing. What would a woman do in a situation like this? The more flustered he became, thinking, what should I do? What should I do? The more he panicked. And then, right when he was totally at a loss with no idea what to do, stop right there! A girl stood there with the sun at her back. She was wearing a full-body suit like she jumped out of one of those cheesy special effects shows, and even with the light behind her, you could clearly tell her face was beautiful. Sota knew she had to be a magical girl.
Persistently dogging a girl in a deserted alleyway is inexcusable.
What the hell is that outfit? Mr. Mizoyaki stuttered.
You're supposed to say, who are you?
That's not the discussion here, and this has nothing to do with you. Butt out.
You don't get that she doesn't like what you're doing?
Mr. Mizoyaki and the magical girl were arguing. Across the older man's shoulder, the magical girl winked at Sota. In other words, she was telling him to hurry up and run away. So the heroine watching over this area must have come to help him since he was in trouble. Sota bowed to her, then ran for the station as fast as possible. Yes, he most unfortunately ran as fast as possible. Arriving at the station, he looked over at his backpack to pull out his ticket when he noticed what was wrong. A magical girl's costume is specifically made to withstand her activity. Hang on, I gotta get a sneeze. She can fly faster than the speed of sound or dive deep underground, but her costume won't rip or fray. By comparison, human clothing was not made to be worn by magical girls. This was no problem when they ambled along at a normal human pace, but normal clothing didn't have the durability to withstand full speed. His skirt had shredded, his hat split open, his shirt was a mess, and his backpack, contents and all, was now fit only for the trash. When Sota realized what had happened to his rare items, he wailed. The people around him, who heard the outcry, turned to look at him, which made him scream again. His first cry was a "Yeah!" and the second one was more of a "Eek!" Did he instantly cover his chest out of reflex? Oh, I should maybe share the picture. Or was it instinct? Since now he had no ticket or wallet, he couldn't take the train back. Worse than that, now he had no clothes. He was so mortified he couldn't move his legs. As he slumped there on the ground, a hand rested on Lampucel's shoulder. Huh? The color of his body changed, creating a collar, sleeves, pattern, pockets, and fasteners. At a glance, it would look like skin-tight clothing. He rose to one knee and looked behind him. Nothing. Nobody. It'll be no masterwork. It'll reach home. He turned around on his knees, then stood up to check everywhere, but there was no one there after all. Still, that voice had not been a hallucination. Every button or zipper he touched turned out to be his own skin. If you looked closely enough, you'd probably be able to tell that he wasn't wearing any clothing, but this should be enough to fool people. He couldn't understand what had just happened, but it was painfully clear that all eyes around were still locked on him. He had no choice. Lapucelle shook off their gazes and ran. It was a long way home, but if he sprinted along the railway line, he should be able to make it. But what was this? There was no way anyone but a magical girl could have done this. Was Tokyo a city full of them? Where one would pop up every time there was a problem? Was that because of its population density? The next day, Sota read the report on the meetup, which said that Magical Girlie was cute and smiled weakly. She believed the hotel pamphlet when it said you could see the Tokyo Skytree from the window, but now that she was there, a building under construction was in the way, and she wasn't able to see even the tip of the tree. Pressing up against the window, she thought maybe, somehow, she could see it. But the only result was a mark from her cheek on the glass. Sitting on the bed of the business hotel, Mashiro Kuji was in low spirits. Cranberry had given her an order. Melville, we have a request of you. Do you mind? A certain magical girl website is planning a meetup soon, and I'd like you to infiltrate them. They say many of these fans possess aptitude for the role. If you find anyone with potential, then scout them. Oh no, it will be quite all right. I know you can do it. So do your best. Go. And things had gone fine until she'd actually managed to sneak into the meetup. but she had felt too awkward to talk to people, and to make it worse, La Pucelle, a participant in Cranberry's exam, had shown up in transformation at one point. In a panic, Mashiro had hardly been able to do her job at all through to the end of the meetup. Cranberry had made this request of her because she believed in Mashiro, in Melville, the magical girl. But at this rate, she couldn't even make an excuse to Cranberry. La Pucelle had talked to her about a bunch of things, and Mashiro, concerned for her, had followed her out. But the one to save her had been Genopsycho Yumenoshima. Still invisible, Melville had missed her opportunity to appear. The one thing she had accomplished was saving La Pucelle when she'd lost her clothes. If Melville had done nothing and left La Pucelle helpless, it might have hindered Cranberry's exam in some way. In other words, Melville had been useful to Cranberry. Probably. She wanted to believe that. Mashiro reflected on her day. She wasn't good at talking to people, and she was even worse at mingling with groups of strangers. But if she just decided she was bad and left it at that, she wouldn't grow. She made up her mind not to be shy about her accent and to do her best to try talking to people. And that's the end of our first story. The next one is called The Case of the Missing Beef. The Maid Saw It. This story is set about a year before the Game and Magical Girl Raising Project Restart begins. The bus riders were clamoring in excitement, everyone snatching the mic from one another as they sang anime songs and hit songs. All these kids were from different grade levels and schools and had only just met, but they laughed together as if they'd been friends for a decade. The summer camp was sure to be a lot of fun. Noriko Nonohara was one of those excited passengers. In fact, it could be said that it was precisely because she was having fun that the atmosphere was humming like this. Noriko Nonohara, the magical girl Noko, had the magic power to transmit her own feelings to those around her. She would influence everyone, without exception, with both her negative and positive feelings. If Noriko was enjoying herself, so was everyone else. And this occasion was different when she was at home, when she was at school, and when she was working as Noko. Her mother and father had sent her off, telling her to go have lots of fun, and Noriko intended to do so. Normally, when she was transformed into Noko and going through her typical day, she would restrain and control her emotions to lead her class in a better direction. At this camp, she planned to let her feelings go and prioritize her own enjoyment. She would do what she wanted, aside from the minimal level of control necessary to erase suspicions about her transformation and reduce the impression of her appearance created. "Oh, I could see it!" A boy sitting in the seat in front of her stood up and pointed. Beyond the winding mountain road, they caught a glimpse of a reddish-brown building. It was square and flat on all sides, like a giant matchbox. That was the place they had been staying. Shinobu Hyoka was a magical girl, as well as a detective. How many people these days actually believe detectives only handled the bizarre cases you read about in mystery novels? Most people had to believe that most detective work was common and vulgar, like searching for runaways, doing background checks, and gathering evidence that a spouse was cheating. But the reality didn't even live up to that. The work Shinobu Hyoka had been assigned by her boss was, to be precise, not even work. So in other words, this is volunteering, right?
Yep, you got it.
Shinobu meant for her face and tone of voice to convey the silent message, "What the hell is this bullshit, old man?" But her boss was utterly unmoved as he sipped at his coffee.
"We've got to send them somewhere from our office. One of the people running this thing has done a lot for us, so we can't refuse."
Shinobu scowled at her boss. He looked back at her coolly. She dropped her gaze to the knees of her pantsuit, changed her expression to a doubtful one, and jerked her head up again.
Why me?
It's training. This was how you got to become a full-fledged detective back in the old days. I did all this too. His tone brooked no argument. The way he said it gave Shinobu the impression he assumed she would never consider refusing in the first place. And the fact was, though she could complain, she couldn't say no. Thus, it was decided that Shinobu would serve as a staff in a children's camp.
Shinobu, go help us setting up the campfire. Okay, I'm going.
Shinobu, make sure all the times on the clocks match.
Okay.
Shinobu, do roll call, please.
Everyone's accounted for.
Shinobu didn't know how her boss had explained her presence, but she couldn't help feeling as if she was being treated as the lowest underling among the staff, a gopher to do everyone's bidding. She was sure her boss would have made some glib comment.
She's a newbie at my agency. This is part of her training to be a detective, so work her hard, please.
This was the sort of boss he was. The summer camp gathered applicants from all over the country. It was large scale because of the breadth of its recruitment. And there were a lot of kids and comparatively few staff. Each person had plenty of work to do, and the underlings in particular felt the full effects of this. Shinobu sat down on a cabin bench, canned coffee in hand, and breathed a sigh. The brilliant green lawn that had covered the whole gently sloping hill rippled in a refreshing breeze. Here and there, children were laughing and playing. Even though they'd only met that day, they'd already made friends. The atmosphere appeared peaceful, but the people managing it were having a rough time. The little kids ran around everywhere they wanted, casually pulling stunts that got their supervisors yelling, "That's dangerous! Stop!" Shinobu stood up, blew her whistle, and pointed a finger.
Hey, you! I said no climbing trees, didn't I?
The kids shrieked with laughter and scrambled away. The struggle was never ending. The children were resilient, too. After being forced to yell nonstop all afternoon and evening, Shinobu was already exhausted. But the kids were loudly demanding the next event, even when she told them, "It's nighttime, so why don't you go to bed already?" None of them would listen.
All right, next up is the test of courage. Shinobu, you help with prep. Huh? Me?
We'll be dimming the lights in the building to make the course. They'll be coming in from the entrance, following directions to the cafeteria, where they get their proof that they've made it, and then it's over.
Which part am I in charge of?
You scare the kids at the end of the cafeteria. Your boss told me you're good at this sort of thing, eh? Shinobu were to take the legal route and sue her boss for spreading around half-truths about her. Could she win?
Damn it, I'll do it. I just have to do it, don't I?
It was her boss who she was mad at, and because he wasn't there, her fist cut through air. So someone else would have to bear the brunt of her anger. Those kids who had been driving Shinobu crazy since the afternoon with their endless disobedience. After dinner, prep took about 30 minutes. Shinobu was tired and irritated, but she never want anything horrible to happen to the children, of course. Ultimately, she was just going to scare them. This was the task assigned to her, and it had to be what the kids wanted too. From the outside, she could hear kids saying,
"Tests of courage are never scary anyway, right?"
And
"These scares are so obvious."
the hallway leading to the cafeteria had been decorated with toy monsters and paper ghosts made by staff. It was all pretty obvious. It would have been better if they had sent the kids out into the forest. But apparently they hadn't been able to get permission for safety reasons, so they had ended up doing a cheap version.
But don't you underestimate adults, you little brats.
Deployed alone in the cafeteria, Shinobu transformed into the magical girl Detectbell. Detectbell's magic was to converse with buildings. When Detect Bell kissed the wall of the cafeteria, a big face emerged from the whole wall. It was an old face, and the way the light hit it made it look vaguely eerie, too.
What is it?
asked the face. Some kids will be coming here soon. Scare them.
Why?
We're doing a test of courage, and they've been making fun of you, saying the scares here are too obvious.
I don't like people making fun of me.
Right? So then scare them nice and good. But you're not allowed to hurt them or anything like that.
She instructed the face to disappear until a target appeared, and then she hid herself in the shadow of some curtains. Excited, she waited 5 minutes before someone came in. From Detect Bell's position, she could only see the kid from behind. It looked like a girl, probably around middle school age. The girl was just about to reach out to take one of the proof of completion slips on the cafeteria table when the face appeared on the wall and licked the girl's face with its long tongue. Shinobu must have spent a full 5 seconds pumping her fist and thinking, "Yes!" The girl screamed and ran from the cafeteria, and for some reason, Shinobu felt terrified too, and ran out after the girl. The sounds of screams and yells rang out from everywhere, and the hellish wails echoed through the mountains until it wasn't just the kids anymore. Even the adults were running around in confusion, crying. Some jumping into their rooms in the cabins to lock the doors from the inside, while others trembled under tables, and yet others ran around until they exhausted themselves. By 11 at night, the uproar had settled, and all the children and staff were confirmed to be safe. Not even given the time to wonder why on earth the uproar had gotten this big. Shinobu continued to chase down the children. Once they put the kids to bed, all the staff gathered in the hall, and the leader raged at her that she had clearly gone too far. Shinobu made herself as small as she could. All the other girls in Noriko's room seemed to have fallen asleep. She'd heard that during these overnight events, you would stay up late to talk about crushes and stuff. But it was already late now, and everyone was tired too, mainly because of her. Noriko brought the blanket up over her chin. She totally let her guard down. She was a magical girl. Her physical abilities far surpassed those of a normal human. She could see through darkness, and no matter what attacked her, she'd be able to deal with it. And there was no way she'd ever get scared over some baldly obvious test of courage that wouldn't even scare a baby. Or so she had thought. She'd been arrogant. She didn't know how they pulled that off, but it had been truly terrifying. Normally, Noriko could keep herself under control and restrain any disturbances in her heart, but that thing had been scary enough to make the entirety of her composure evaporate. The movement and sensation of that tongue had been horribly real. Driven by terror, Noriko had scampered about in confusion, transmitting her fear everywhere and causing a huge panic. She'd nearly caused a total disaster. It was a small mercy that no one had gotten hurt. But still, that tongue, that face, just what sort of trick had they used to make it like that? At the time, she'd been too busy being terrified, but now she was unbearably curious. She opened her eyes a crack, thinking about it, only to see a face in the wood knots on the ceiling. It reminded her of the giant human face that emerged from the wall of the cafeteria, and she panicked and closed her eyes. Even after that huge uproar, the next morning the kids were disgustingly full of energy. In fact, it actually seemed like they were happy about the incident. The adults, however, were unhappy compared with how they'd been the day before. They were acting a little cold toward Shinobu, too. If news of this were to be passed on to her boss, he was guaranteed to rail at her about how she couldn't even do work that wasn't work. So she had to do everything from this point on properly to raise her now rock-bottom reputation by at least a fraction of an inch. Shinobu, please check the meat. Roger, right away. The plan for the day was orienteering and then a barbecue. They were high up on the mountain, but it being summer, it was pretty hot, and the rays of the sun beat down hard, even in the morning. How can they bear to walk around in this sun? Shinobu wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She pulled the plastic pack of meat out from the jumbo-sized fridge. The coldness felt nice. There were a lot of people, so it followed that there were also plenty of meat. It had to be the first time in her life she had ever seen so much. Whoa, man. Hey, is this for dinner today? Having finished their breakfast, kids were coming together. Was it the nature of children to form a horde whenever something was happening? Shinobu had to have been a child once too, but she couldn't remember anymore. The kids had only just finished their breakfast, but they nonetheless chorused with cries of,
"It looks so good!"
and
"I want to eat it!"
Listening to them made hunger well up from the pit of Shinobu's stomach too. It did indeed look good. She wanted to eat it. She wanted to fry it and wolf it down. No, right now. She'd even take it raw. "They're not going to notice if I eat a little bit," she thought. "If I just eat a little bit," she thought. And her hand was reaching out when she came to her senses. If she nibbled at this meat along with the children, her already rock-bottom reputation would sink below ground level.
"Hey, this is for later. Get ready for orienteering now."
Shinobu somehow managed to drive the kids away inside. Maybe she was more tired than she realized. No matter how hungry she was, it was crazy to think it was a good idea to eat raw meat. At any rate, her examination of the meat was done for now. She couldn't leave it sitting out at room temperature, so she looked over to the tabletop, about to clear it away, and tilted her head. The meat that had been there just a moment before was gone. Shinobu looked under the table and inside the fridge. She even pulled open the drawers in the freezer, but it wasn't anywhere. Anxiety gradually rose within her, then ballooned all at once. Restraining her impending panic, she looked around one more time, but the meat truly wasn't anywhere. It was gone.
"Stingy! At least let us touch it. You're overreacting."
The staff lady drove the kids away. Though each of them grumbled their complaints, they dispersed. Noriko was part of the dissipating group, but she didn't complain. She took it for granted that the staff wouldn't let them touch the food, and though the lady had spoken rather sharply, that may have been because she hadn't gotten a proper sleep the previous night, which was basically Noko's fault.
"What are we doing next again?"
She said orienteering.
"So, what's this orienteering thing?"
I don't know really, but I heard it's kind of like a treasure hunt. A treasure hunt? It sounded like there was still more fun in store. It had been there until just a moment before. Shinobu was certain of that. She hadn't put it away. In other words, it should still be there, but it wasn't. She didn't understand why, but she did understand this was very bad. This was a case. It was time for a detective. Though she knew the situation was bad, her heart was racing.
"Shinobu, if you're done there, come over here and help."
Okay! After making sure the windows were locked, Shinobu closed all the curtains in the entrance to the cafeteria, too. Pulling a mop out of the cleaning closet to wedge it through the door handle. Now nobody would see her. She transformed into Detect Bell and kissed the wall. Transforming into a magical girl calmed her down a little. This was probably just a kid's prank. While Shinobu had been herding them away, a different group must have carried off the meat. That story hurt. But even if that had happened, she had still searched the cafeteria and come up empty. If they'd hid it in there, they'd been really clever about it. If they'd taken it out of the cafeteria, then first she had to make sure that was actually what had happened. She would check that before she chased them down. At any rate, Shinobu figured all she had to do was ask the cafeteria directly, so she kissed its wall, but no face emerged from it. Huh? She'd only been combing her head, but now she got agitated again. This had never happened before. Detect Bell's magic would even work on crumbling old abandoned buildings, though no building would tell her anything that would be disadvantageous to its owner. This was the first time no face had emerged at all. Her muddled mind dispersely pursued the possibilities. What was going on here? I just noticed the voice mod seems a little quieter than normal. I guess I could turn the gain up. Or, hello? I don't want to... Hang on, I might have to restart voice mod. Hello? Yeah, I think I do. I think it went out.
Another raid? You know, maybe we should look into getting insurance on these things.
Hello? Okay. I think the mic's normal now. Thank you so much, Sweet Scheme, for the raid. Welcome. I'm reading through the Magical Girl Raising Project series. I'm on book 4, which is a collection of lighthearted mini-stories. Welcome. I hope your stream was good. Let's see. Her muddled mind desperately pursued the possibilities. What was going on here? Not only was the meat mysteriously missing, but a face.
Hey, Saffra.
Hello, Gladys. But a face for the cafeteria hadn't appeared for some reason. It was strange. She couldn't figure out why this was happening. Oh, this is Magical Girl Raising Project Book 4. Was this a test for Shinobu because she'd relied too much on her magic? Was the god of detectives telling her to try solving this theft without her magic? The culprit was probably a child. So was their motive hunger, or was this a prank? The gears of Detect Bell's baffled brain continued to turn. The idea that the culprit was a child was nothing more than an educated guess on her part. Okay. Yeah. It's pretty long. I think it's like 17 or 18 books at this point. And there's multiple arcs, and there was an anime that covered the first arc, and there's going to be an anime coming up soon that's covering the second arc. And the book I'm on right now, book 4, is a collection of lighthearted stories that tell little cute side stories of the characters from the first 2 arcs. And I'm finishing that book today. So next time I will read, it will be the start of the 3rd arc. The group of new magical girls. Could be someone else. Yes, like an animal. In the book that was recognized as the first detective novel in history, the culprit had been an animal. As mystery novel theories went, it wasn't so odd. They were up in the mountains, so a bear or something? Wolves? Were extinct here, huh? So then a tanuki or a fox? No, neither of those. So what, mice? Cockroaches? It was way too much meat for such small creatures to carry away. That would necessitate disaster movie-level swarms, and there was no way she'd have failed to notice that. So then maybe another of the staff? What for? To set her up? Detect Bell pulled out her auxiliary item, her magnifying glass. If she couldn't talk with the wall, then she just had to find some other proof. She directed the magnifying glass at the spot where the meat had been, and noticed something shining faintly. It looked like a liquid. She rubbed it with her finger and found it was gooey. When she leaned her nose toward it, it stank.
The heck is this? Drool?
If the culprit had been drooling, did that mean hunger was the motive after all? It seemed plausible for either a child or an animal. It seemed unlikely an adult would drool. So she could probably cross the staff off of her list of suspects. Nothing else caught her eye. She could send the saliva over to forensics for DNA analysis and find the culprit that way.
Shinobu, you're not done yet? Sorry, I'm coming now.
Of course she didn't have that kind of time. Detective Bell's brain got into gear again. She narrowed it down to either an animal or a child. So then which was it? Were there any other possibilities? A goblin? A ghost? A demon? Such unscientific ideas, but, well, magical girls were real, so could she really cross off ghosts and demons? This building wasn't that old, but it did have an atmosphere to it. Shaped like a giant matchbox, it seemed like it could be the setting for a Mystery in the Mansion style incident. And during the test of courage the night before, though she'd been one of the people who was supposed to do the scaring, she'd felt a little something. Something was bothering her. Detective Bell drew back the brim of her hunting cap and strolled around the cafeteria. She wasn't walking around looking for evidence. She was trying to probe the thing in her head that was bothering her. The heels of her shoes tapped against the linoleum of the floor with a high-pitched noise. Something had happened in the cafeteria the previous night. A panic? Not that. There had been something before everyone had panicked. She had done something. The original cause of it all had been... Ah! Belle remembered. Belle's magic was to make a face appear on any building and to converse with it. She had to kiss a building to activate it and kiss it again to undo it. After she had summoned the cafeteria's face in the test of courage the day before, everyone had freaked out and she'd forgotten to undo her magic. In other words, when she'd kissed the cafeteria just now with the intention of summoning the face, she'd ended up giving it the undo kiss. So it was no wonder the face hadn't come out. Suddenly, she felt exhausted, but this case wasn't solved yet. Belle kissed the wall, and the same face from the previous day emerged. Now she knew her deductions had been correct.
I should have just kissed you again.
Look quite tired,
said the face.
Never mind that. Tell me who the thief is, the one who stole the meat.
The face twisted into a wrinkled expression. It seemed apologetic and also embarrassed. As far as Detective Bell, no. Oh, that should be new. No building face had ever made such an expression.
Well, I do know who the culprit is. Yes, I do.
The face spat up something from its big mouth with a pchoo. It was the pack of meat. It was sticky and wet with saliva. Detective Bell was temporarily dumbfounded and angry, leaning in toward the face.
What the heck were you doing?
Well, I'm not quite sure. For some reason, I just suddenly wanted to put that meat into my mouth so badly. Before I knew it, I had reached out my tongue and snatched it up. It's so baffling to me, really. I've never felt this way before, and now that feeling like I want to put the meat in my mouth, it's gone too.
Save the excuses for later. Anyway, I've got to wash this thing.
Detective Bell turned on the faucet in the sink to run some water. Fortunately, it looked like the plastic pack hadn't ripped.
Why would you do something I didn't order you to do?
I'm sorry.
I didn't think you guys even could eat things.
I can't. If I could, then the meat obviously wouldn't still be intact. I was just putting it in my mouth, really.
Huh. It seems like something you could use as a trick in a locked room murder mystery.
Belle's mind, ready to wander off to this unseen locked room mystery, was pulled back to reality by a call from outside.
Shinobu, you're still not done? I'm done. I'm coming now.
This is what happens when you're a real-life detective after all. she thought as she rinsed the pack of meat. Even as Noriko walked around the woods during orienteering, she still couldn't forget the meat she'd just seen. She'd never seen so much before. Her parents had taken her to a yakiniku restaurant a while back, and the meat they'd had there had been so good. This would be the first time she'd ever had a barbecue, but it had to be about as good as that yakiniku, right?
Over there!
A girl walking with her pointed at a cedar tree. An orange marker was tied around its trunk.
Let's finish this fast and go eat that meat. For sure! And make it well done. It looks so good.
Maybe Noriko's thoughts about meat had gotten transmitted around by her magic. All her friends were smiling and talking about how they looked forward to the barbecue. When she had seen that meat earlier in the cafeteria, the boys had reached out toward it, and the girls had devoured it with their eyes. They might have been influenced by Noriko's magic, too.
But that's fine, right? Thinking about how it looks good is sure to make it taste good for real. What are you talking about? Nothing. Come on, let's hurry and get that stamp.
Alright, so we got 3 more stories. That was the end of the second one. I'm going to take a short break, going to refill my water and blow my nose. Be back in just a few minutes. I'm back. Starting the third story today. It's called Magical Illegal Girl. The story is set a few weeks before the Magical Candy Contest and Magical Girl Raising Project begins. It was in the past year that the Jinbang Mei had started operations in N City. Originally, N City had been occupied by the Fujianese Li Xinhuan. Their organization took on miscellaneous tasks in N City, things that local syndicates needed done or lacked the know-how to accomplish, such as falsifying passports, smuggling, and so on. And this specialization allowed them to subsist independently. For some slightly complicated reasons, the Li Xinhuan Huan, it's a Y-U-A-N, maybe it's Huan, had come to be replaced by the Jinbang Mei. The Shanghainese Jinbang Mei and the Fujianese Li Xinhuan had been at odds for quite a while, basically since before the Vietnam War, and butted heads repeatedly. Over many years, in various locales, they had fought with both words and fists. The Jinbang Mei's boss getting replaced after 30 years was the trigger that led the leaders of both groups to shake hands. However, they hadn't simply set aside their conflict. What was most important to both parties was face. In order to create an outcome in which either ended up the loser, they arranged a give and take based on a highly detailed set of arrangements to exchange responsibility and control, also that both sides could stand proud, believing they had won. So Jinbang Mei inherited Li Xinhuan's businesses in N City. If this had been just a simple inheritance, then no issues would have arisen from this, since they'd established a division of territory with the local organized crime syndicate, the Tetsuwa Kai. The problem was the way the Li Xinhuan presented itself to the Tetsuwa Kai, as opposed to what they were really after. Superficially, the Li Xinhuan and the Tetsuwa Kai were on good terms. The Li Xinhuan didn't touch the Tetsuwa Kai's sources of income, profiting only on passport forgery and smuggling aid, or so they made it seem. In reality, they sold quasi-legal drugs, had an illegal bookie at the racetrack, and ran a private mahjong gambling ring. The Tetsuwa Kai was not a collection of fools. They hadn't failed to notice this, rather. They had been overlooking it, figuring it was so minor, it wasn't worth taking them to task. But then the Li Xinhuan and the Jinbang Mei switched places, and even though the Li Xinhuan explained to the Jinbang Mei what sort of work they did and how they did it, they weren't able to educate the Jinbang Mei on all the subtleties. So the Jinbang Mei started enthusiastically tackling job after job, and to the Tetsuwa Kai, it looked like the rising power replacing the Li Xinhuan was trying to take over the town. So the Tetsuwa Kai gave the order to their bodyguard, Magical Girl, to attack the Jinbang Mei's base. The cowboy-style Magical Girl crushed their base all by herself, and the Jinbang Mei's forces were eliminated from N City.
It would all have gone so much faster if that were the end of it. That's not what happened.
The old man paused for a moment, tilted the glass in his right hand, then moistened his throat with a final gulp of red liquid.
The Jinbang Mei are aware of the nature of the humiliation they've suffered, and they're plotting revenge.
So what? The old man shot a worried look at the telephone receiver in his left hand.
You sound as if you don't care one whit. I've made this call because I'm concerned for you, friend. N City is dangerous. I can't call it a good place for a magical girl to lie low.
I've no need of friends. They're just a hindrance to me. And you're nothing more than a business connection.
The voice of the girl coming through the receiver sounded low and calm, in contrast with her ultra-feminine vocal mannerisms. The old man set the glass on his right hand on the table. In his right hand on the table.
It stings to have unrequited feelings at my age,
he said sorrowfully. But the girl on the other other end of the line didn't react.
By the way, what did come of that matter of the mermaid tear?
You trying to start a quarrel with me? I'm busy and I don't have the time for this nonsense.
Of course not. More importantly, as I've told you, the city is no place for you to be. You should relocate.
She hung up on him. The old man brought his brows together. I think we mixed up who was saying what there. Oh well. I'm not sure. Looking at the receiver, but then he adjusted the collar of his dressing gown and left the receiver on the table. He pulled his eye patch out, 2 inches to snap it in place again, leaned into the backrest of his wheelchair, and gave a deploring sigh. Then he stretched his back to turn to the man in a suit standing next to him.
Hey, Totoyama, you're my friend, right?
Ripple stood atop the roof of a department building in Nakayato. She told herself she wasn't getting moody. At nighttime, this department store roof, and especially the 100-yen rides and popcorn kiosks, made you sentimental. It had been a week since she'd become a magical girl. She was getting used to the job and was gradually earning more candy. Calamity Mary hadn't shown her face again. If they never ran into each other, then they'd never fight. Top Speed visited her every other day. She was annoying and a bother, but she was a good cook. Still, Top Speed was the type who'd get real carried away if you gave her any compliments. A voice. Even from the roof, she could hear yelling, coming from down in front of the Nakayato department store, a spot that was typically empty of pedestrians late at night. Gazing downward, she saw multiple people there. The man who'd yelled reached out his arm, and someone grabbed it and threw him, while a large suitcase sent another man flying. Ripple jumped over the fence and ran down the wall of the building. It might be a pain, but it was time for a magical girl to arrive on the scene. The mermaid tear was the start of all this mess. It was some aquamarine or sapphire once, beloved by the noble families of the Tudor or York court or whatever, and some nouveau rich oil baron had pilfered it and sold it off to a fence. The plan had been for Rianetta to accept this gem as compensation for her work. She had no particular affection for jewels. It was simply that some wealthy individual, an acquaintance of her late father's, wanted the mermaid tear for the petty reason of giving it to his granddaughter as a present. It would make good money if she pretended to be a dealer and sold it off quickly to him. Or it should have. Her employer claimed they'd given her the gem. They insisted that a magical girl carrying a doll had shown up at the appointed time to carry it away. Rianetta knew that was a lie. At the time of their appointment, there had been no one there to make a deal with. Due to this discrepancy between their claims and the fact that neither of them would back down, Rianetta was now on the run from her former employer. According to them, this incident made Rianetta a thief for trying to take a double reward. Rianetta could yell, "You're the one who failed to compensate me!" All she wanted. But there was no one to listen to her. It was the nature of the world. Might makes right. That had been the case even before Rianetta had become Rianetta. If this world were the simpler kind where righteousness made you right, then surely she would still have been a pampered rich girl. When her life as a fugitive began, Rianetta went to End City to lie low, but a wealthy acquaintance of her father had warned her that End City was no place for her to be. She couldn't bring herself to like the man, but she figured for the time being she would take his advice and leave End City. But then, right as she was leaving her hideout, someone had showed up to challenge her. And not the people who had been looking for her, but an organization searching for the magical girl over some other matter. They were probably the Jin Bong Mei who'd come up in that earlier conversation. She couldn't be wasting time in a place like this now, facing three gangster types. She tossed one aside and punched down another. Right when she was about to kick the last one flying, a soft palm restrained her doll's shin, stopping her leg on the spot. What on earth? She saw Gaeta, a red scarf and a shuriken-shaped hair clip, holding sleek back black hair in a side ponytail. The three gangsters yelped and ran off, but Rionetta wasn't even looking at them anymore. That strange ninja-themed costume, that perfect face, and most importantly, she had been able to stop Rionetta's kick. In other words, this had to be a magical girl. Rionetta dashed off at lightning speed, not slowing even slightly as she ripped window shutters, bent iron bars, and shattered glass at the entrance of the department store to break into the building. She sensed the presence coming after her. She was being pursued. There was no mistaking it. It wasn't a human. It was a moving human-sized doll. An exquisitely designed doll that resembled a human girl at first glance, had been tossing and punching men, and had been just about to kick another. Ripple had simply come between them with the casual intention of stopping the fight. Then, startled by the rare sight of an animate doll, she had been unable to keep the thing from fleeing, and it escaped into the department store. By now, the alarms would be ringing at the security company, but Ripple couldn't just leave. The doll girl had leaped into the department store so immediately that Ripple had failed to react, then run off so fast she would have a hard time catching up. Ripple didn't know what this doll girl really was yet, and at the very least, it wasn't an opponent humans could handle, and just now it had been attacking humans. Kano Sazanami's tendency was to shrug off anything that wasn't her business, but now that she was Ripple, she couldn't be like that anymore. The magical girl lifestyle really was an annoying pain in the butt. Ripple rushed up the steps, taking 10 at a time, kicking aside the furnishings inside the store as she cut through. A mannequin leaped at her from the side, startling her, but she tossed a kunai back at it, and then she had to chase her quarry around until she came out on the roof. The doll girl was looking at her chain-link fence at her back. Ripple blew out all the breath she'd been holding in her lungs. Rionetta's preferred method of fighting was to start by throwing dolls at her opponent. If she used dolls, no matter how many of them got wasted, she wouldn't get hurt. Dolls were not her allies, friends, or comrades. They were just things. It wouldn't affect her if they were destroyed. She observed how the magical girl reacted when she was attacked by a doll, rather, a mannequin this time. The girl was agile. She had good judgment, too. But if her skill in a fight was all she had going for her, Rionetta could manage. The problem was the unique magic each magical girl possessed. If her magic was incompatible with Rionetta's, or if it was beyond simply incompatible and was just absolutely powerful, then she would probe out a weakness in that magic or avoid the fight entirely. But this was not one of those times. Her opponent threw a kunai at the mannequin, and the weapon's trajectory twisted around oddly to hit its target. That sort of bend was not caused by spinning or air resistance. That had to be the girl's magic. This power would be easy for Rionetta to manage. Her pursuer was still a young magical girl. Her experience hadn't yet caught up with her powers. Rionetta had years on her. She'd been killing and nearly been killed herself, working for money and using the powers of a magical girl for personal gain. She had abandoned helping people long ago and had made it through far more carnage than this girl ever had. It had begun with her father. There was no way she could repay his debts by lying around and working a normal job, and thus the little princess of a wealthy family had been unable to continue living without getting her hands dirty. And once her hands had been stained by that nasty work, she couldn't get out. The red of the blood had seeped into her and wouldn't wash away. Rianetta had not begun this work out of a desire to save her father from dire straits. She had no wish to go through such hardships for garbage like him. It was simply because the lender she was dealing with forced on her his rationale.
No matter what's happened to the father, the daughter will repay the money he's borrowed.
Rianetta didn't care what happened to her father, and she didn't need friends, companions, or allies. All that bound her was her own personal safety and money. Though she might play the friend and act chummy when the time came, she would kick anyone off a cliff. She had done something similar many times, in fact. Rianetta was making it seem like she was running around, but she was casting her magic on every doll in the department store. She would lie in wait for her pursuer on the roof and send all the dolls in the building to attack her from behind. It would be a pincer attack. Mannequins, stuffed animals, mascot dolls. Rianetta's magic was puppetry, and she could still control plenty more. The doll girl should be cornered now. Ripple kicked open the door to the roof to confront her, but when she saw the girl's smirking face and mannequins attacked her from behind, she realized this was a trap. She sent one mannequin's head flying with a roundhouse kick and fired a kunai in another's shin, punching and whacking until they were destroyed. But more came. Dolls appeared one after another in the door that led from the roof to the interior of the department store. That bare roof was only as wide as a playground with a few rides, but it was now as crowded as an amusement park parade. Flying and leaping, Ripple hopped from place to place, staying in motion so as not to be surrounded. Some small creatures ran between her legs. One of them tripped her. About to fall, she put a hand on the wall, but something grabbed it. It was a puppet, the sort you'd normally manipulate by tugging their strings. They were moving on their own, swarming around trying to tangle Ripple in their strings. All the string must have had magic cast on it, because it was considerably stronger than normal. Next, the stuffed creatures came to attack her. They looked like adorable cartoonish renditions of animals, but each and every one of them held razor-like blades in their paws. With these thin, sharp blades, they cut Ripple all over. As her feet caught in the strings, leaving her unable to walk easily, blood spurted from her cuts. Scolding the fear in her heart, Ripple ranted at her limbs for weakening. Like Gulliver struggling against the Lilliputians, she yanked the strings, swinging the puppets around as she drew and swiped with the katana at her back. She sliced up the stuffed animals, kicking away the puppets that still surged towards her, and rolled to avoid a mannequin's fist. She turned aside a kick, dodged a knife hand strike, and pointed her katana at the pair of reinforcements that had arrived at the entrance. The two dolls were both life-sized, an old gentleman in a white suit and a clown with a big, curly red hair. Oh yeah, I passed by some fast food places on the way here too. Though the general assumption was that they didn't get along, the two statues attacked Ripple with superb coordination, each covering for the other's weaknesses. Despite taking a few hits, Ripple somehow managed to pull through to find that a group of mannequins had appeared. Some were half-dressed and some were naked without a single scrap of cloth on them, but all were expressionless as they gradually gathered at the entrance. How many were there? At a glance, Ripple gave up on counting. It was no use. Something was moving around the shadow of the mannequins. It was fast, and it was nauseatingly intimidating in a way the other dolls weren't. It moved from shadow to shadow to hide behind the clown, and from there it swiped out at Ripple with its claws. She couldn't dodge them entirely. They ripped open her cheek, and blood gushed out. It was the very first doll, the ball-jointed doll made to look like a beautiful girl, attacked her with claws on her right hand. Then she swiftly hid in the shadows of the mannequins, vanishing once again. The reason Ripple had failed to dodge that attack entirely was because of her opponent's ball joints and accordion-like arms. They made her reach much greater. Her strike had gone farther than Ripple had anticipated. The arm had reached out and bent more than it was supposed to, and slipped past Ripple's katana. If Ripple hadn't bent backward, those claws would have torn her cardioid carotid artery right open. The swarm of stuffed animals came together, piling up like a human pyramid to become one single wall. The moment Ripple realized what was happening, the claw swung out, piercing through the ball of plush. She reacted reflexively, not with her katana, but with her left hand. She blocked the claws with her left palm. The claws pierced it, slicing through to her wrist. Blood sprayed from her hand, but Ripple kept clenching onto those claws. She caught the doll girl. Ripple flipped the katana in her hand around into a reverse grip, swinging at her. But right at that instant, there was a clicking noise as the doll girl detached her own right wrist to take a step back, and Ripple's blade cut through air. She was taken by surprise. Her stance was broken as her blade missed, and that was when the swarm of dolls, now a massive lump with the pharmacy mascot frog at their head, body slammed her. Ripple was launched upward. In midair, she caught sight of the doll girl and her mocking jeer out of the corner of her eye. Bright red anchor, the color of blood, began filling her body. Still in the air, Ripple spun, landed on the fence, and then leaped into the air again, over the heads of the dolls, to come down on a bench situated to the right of the center area of the roof, and from there she ripped the bench from where it was nailed down, breaking the legs to lift up. The doll girl, the mannequins, the clown and the gentleman, the stuffed animals, and the puppets were all pressing close. Ripple was furious. She was angry at the army of the absurd descending upon her, and she sent that anger into her bones and muscles. Keeping the bench in hand, Ripple spun around in a circle like a top, rather like what pro wrestling world would call a giant swing. Once, twice, 3 times, mowing down the oncoming rush of dolls with the bench as she built momentum to fling it at the entrance to the roof. There was another bench in arm's reach, and she tossed it the same manner, haphazardly destroying everything within sight. Concrete scattered into sand and dust, billowing up thick, until a gust of wind carried them away. Ripple had beaten down the dolls and blocked the entrance from which reinforcements had been coming. But there remained one opponent. The doll girl casually jumped off the back of the bench Ripple had thrown at her and landed. Her most powerful foe was still standing. To be young also meant to be overflowing with energy. Rionetta couldn't intimidate that wild bench-throwing style of fighting. That had surprised her, but this was over. The ninja seemed to have used up her strength on those drastic moves, as she was staggering and ready to collapse. Seeing this was her chance, Rionetta dashed ahead, leaning forward. Kicking up concrete as she ran, she clicked in a new right hand from the wrist joint to replace her old one. She clenched that hand, then opened it again. 10 kunai flew toward Rionetta. Every single one of them defied the laws of physics as they zoomed at her. They were fast, and they had weight too, but she could read their movements. Her right hand smacked one kunai, which dropped another kunai in turn. With her left hand as her shield, she blocked 3 more, dodging another by ducking her head. That one succeeded only in ripping her bonnet as the claws on her left hand shot out to knock 2 more kunai from the air. The remaining 2 kunai failed to reach her, plunging into the ground at her feet. Rionetta's enemy must have mustered her last burst of strength to throw those weapons. Her knees folded, and she thrust out her right hand to support her body. Rionetta took one more step to finish the girl off, and pitched forward. The space between the 2 kunai stuck in the ground sparkled. Tied between the 2 weapons was a transparent screen. So this girl had undone the puppet string, tied these 2 kunai together, and made it seem as if she missed when in fact she had been aiming for the ground? What for? To make Rionetta stumble. Instantly, Rionetta broke her fall with a hand on the ground, but that meant her right hand was now occupied and unable to block the shuriken flying at her from the right side. It tore her face open. Someone with a normal body would have died then, But Rianetta, with her puppet body, still had extra chances. She raised her head just as the katana was about to swing down on her. She stuck out her right arm to protect herself, and it was cut off from the elbow. Ripple was no longer questioning who her opponent was. Before her was an enemy trying to kill her, and the truth was that she was trying to kill her opponent too. When the doll girl got up, Ripple kicked her. When her upper body bent backward, Ripple sliced at her too, cutting right through her beautiful doll clothes to gouge deep into her wooden body. But the doll girl didn't stop moving. With her right arm, which was gone past the elbow, the doll girl blocked Rianetta's katana. Her sleeve ripped in a shower of wood fragments, and her arm got even shorter. The doll girl forced her way forward. This was handy for Ripple. Ripple chose to move together with her enemy's momentum, letting the doll girl push her back to the fence. Now a doll couldn't take her by surprise from behind. Her foe's attacks were becoming wide and sloppy. Ripple repelled and dodged them. The doll girl's accordion arms reached out, but Ripple turned them aside with the dull side of her blade. She heard the sound of the fence behind her getting cut up. The doll girl's strings of attacks were only hitting the fence. Ripple kicked her opponent's left arm hard, seizing the moment when her stance broke to throw a kunai at her left knee and wedge it into her joint. She raised her sword up above the doll, and right when she was about to bring it down, someone wrapped around her from behind. The cold sensation of metal stabbed through Ripple's skin. Her katana wouldn't move. But she destroyed all the dolls. She blocked the entrance where more dolls could appear too. There should have been nothing but fence behind her. The claws thrust at the confused Ripple, and just as she twisted her body to avoid them, a roundhouse kick flew at her from her blind spot to hit her right in the back of her head. Realizing the claw strike had been nothing more than a feint, Ripple passed out. Her pursuer had been a truly strong magical girl. She'd been prepared to kill or be killed, and even when backed into a corner, she'd kept the dark fire deep in her heart smoldering. Given 3 years, or 2 years, or even more, Rianetta might have been the one to go down, but this time Rianetta had won. Rianetta canceled the magic she'd cast on the doll, holding up her pursuer's body, and it turned back into the chain link and crumbled to the ground. In the last stage of the game, Rianetta had pretended to be flailing with desperate attacks, when she had actually been cutting the fence at the ninja girl's back into the shape of a doll. Even if it was hastily and roughly made, ready to break apart at any moment, a doll was a doll. By manipulating the fence cutout, Rianetta had held her pursuer's hands behind her back. Rianetta approached the girl, fallen and still. The damage to Rianetta's left knee was serious, and her movement was stiff, but she could still finish her off at least. If she didn't kill her now, then one day the time would come when she would lose. "Wait, please." Rianetta had felt no presence at all. She sank into a low crouch, almost touching the ground, turning to face the source of the voice. It was a young woman. With the moon at her back, she threw a long shadow on the wreckage of the roof. I thought that voice was Ripple, but I think it wasn't. I think I know who it is. Rianetta's left knee wouldn't move smoothly. Her right arm was in tatters. All her dolls had been wiped out. She didn't have much strength left.
I'm sorry. I'm quite sorry, but could you let this one pass? It's almost time for her exam.
The girl had vines wrapped around her legs. Oh, never mind. I thought that was Top Speed, but it's Cranberry. I'm quite sorry, but could you let this one pass? It's almost time for her exam. The girl had vines wrapped around her legs and roses over her shoulders. Even for a magical girl, she looked fancy. This newcomer, whose voice and appearance was totally unfamiliar to her, made her tremble in the depths of her heart. If you simply must, then I'll be forced to fight too. If you wish, I could be your opponent once more. The outcome might just be different from last time. Rionetta's instincts understood. They told her that if she were to fight now, she would lose. She slowly dragged herself backward. But fate is fate. Are we inevitably designed to meet each other? I've heard this happens quite often to magical girls. Rionetta turned away and scampered down the wall of the department store like an animal. She raced away with a single-minded intent, shaking off the shivers that threatened to rise up from her feet. She told herself she wasn't going to get into fights she wasn't getting paid for. There was the sound of sirens from both police cars and an ambulance. A crowd of rubberneckers had gathered in front of the department store, too. Shoulders heaving, Ripple looked below. The roof, which had been a place of rest, was now entirely destroyed, and mannequins and stuffed animals that had been knocked off the roof were scattered around the department store building.
Hey, what the hell was going on here?
A slight edge of fear colored Topspeed's tone from where she sat on the front seat. When Ripple had come to, she'd found herself on Rapid Swallow's rear seat. Topspeed said that by the time she'd gone to the roof, Ripple was laying there alone. Ripple had lost. Internally, she was trembling with humiliation and anger, like window glass in the middle of a typhoon. Most of all, she was angry at herself for wondering if she'd have won if Topspeed had been there. Giving in to anger, Ripple whapped her mentor over the head.
Ow! What are you doing? Hey!
Ripple focused her irritation and exhaustion on the tip of her tongue and clicked it as hard as she could. It tasted like blood.
Oh, you've returned alive? Splendid. So now that's that. About the mermaid tear.
She hung up on him. The old man looked at the receiver for a while, muttered,
Magical girls, eh?
And then, losing interest, dropped the receiver with a click. Suddenly, his expression changed, and with a chipper look, he said to his granddaughter,
Do you like magical girls, Conway? There's an animated film playing about them now, isn't there?
The old man's granddaughter smoothed her curls with her left hand, pushed down the hem of her uniform skirt, crossed her legs in the other direction, and placed her saucer down on the round table and her teacup on top of it. You're not going to tell me how you'd like to see a movie with your adorable granddaughter before you die, are you?
Don't expect your grandfather to be so admirable. I'm merely curious.
In response to her grandfather's question, the girl's eyes gleamed with a light, even more mature than her manner of speech, even though she looked far younger than that very tone would suggest. She blinked slowly, and when she opened her eyes again, the light was gone. So many magical girl stories nowadays are violent. I personally prefer sweet, romantic stories. Without a word, as to the light that had flickered in the girl's eyes, the old man spread his arms in a jesting manner.
Romance, eh? Do you think you'd have fun watching something like that with your grandfather?
I think it might be enjoyable to watch with a friend. Facing each other, the two of them gave similar smiles. I'm going to really quick answer a text. If you don't mind. And we're on our fourth story. Memories of the Blue Magical Girl. This story is set partly before the game and Magical Girl Raising Project Restart begins, and partly after the game is over.
You mean me? Huh? The magical kingdom? Is this by chance related to magical girls? No way. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that coming up to talk to me when I'm walking around isn't the most magical way to do it, I guess. Oh, that's not what I mean. I just got caught up in my own ideas about that stuff. I have these fantasies about a big owl bringing me a letter, or a witch in a broom coming to deliver a message or something. I'm sorry, really. Huh? Oh, right, I do have time. Hey, let's go over to that cafe over there. Blue Comet? Oh yeah, I actually have met her. Of course I haven't forgotten. I guess it was 2 years ago? 1, 2... That's right. It was about 2 years ago. Would I get in trouble for this? That's not what this is about. So then what is it about? I just have to talk about how I met her? Oh, okay. 2 years ago, I was in my 3rd year of middle school. As for what I was up to, well, studying for my entrance exams. That was the main worry I had on my, that was the main worry on my mind at the time. I was doing my best studying, but my grades had been going down, and every day I was anxious I might have to go for a lower ranked school. Oh, I'll have a cafe au lait. Where was I? Oh yeah, entrance exams were no fun, and wondering if maybe my life would never be fun again. I was really bored, but of course I didn't have the courage to go blow off steam to feel better either. That day was especially awful. The chain came off my bicycle. I'd studied hard at the library when I was like, okay, it's closing, time to go home. I rolled up onto the curb by the gutter and the chain just dropped off. At the time, I didn't know how to fix bike chains. Nobody was walking by either, so I couldn't ask for help. It was already dark out. I walked my bike up to a streetlight, and I was like, maybe this, maybe that, but nothing I tried would work. My hands got all black. And right when I was just like, oh, what do I do? Someone came up to talk to me. Hey, you in trouble? I turned around and she really knocked me for a loop. She had short, straight-cut black hair and gentle, pale brown eyes. Taking those features out of context made it sound like she's the demure type, but she was really gorgeous. I was just zoned out staring at her like, whoa. Plus her outfit was amazing. She had this traditional blue dress, white over the knee socks, and this pure white fluffy fur cape. Before I started studying for exams, I went through a whole bathtub's worth of anime and manga and light novels. I'd seen stuff like this in these stories, but this was the first time I'd ever seen someone wear a cape in real life. And then she had this accessory. I guess it was. Thinking back on it now, maybe it was the real thing. She even had a black and white striped tail, like a white tiger. It was like, here comes a mysterious beauty in cosplay. I was so confused. I mean, if we were in Akihabara or someplace like that, that'd be one thing, but why in this neighborhood? But the girl pushed me aside and touched my bicycle. Even now I still remember perfectly how she smelled when she pushed me out of the way. Oh, it's the chain, huh? Let me see for a sec. I was anxious, not because some stranger was touching my bike or anything like that. But what if she got her clothes dirty? I mean, they looked expensive. I knew that costume had to be pricey. The girl hooked the chain in diagonally and spun the pedals, fixing it up in a flash. Thank you! Oh, no. I'm just glad I could help you out. More importantly, she held both her hands out to me. Her fingers were slim and her palms were white and pretty, but they were black with bicycle oil. I freaked out and pulled out my handkerchief to scrub at her hands, but I'd forgotten, since I'd been fiddling with the chain myself. My own hands were all black too. Handkerchief aside, everything my hands had touched were blackened, and I was freaking myself into a panic. That ain't what I meant, she said. Well, for now, let's just go wash up. She tugged me by the hand into a nearby fountain, where we washed side by side. Man, seeing her up close, she was so cute. But she had a mole like a teardrop. I was zoning out, thinking, man, she's so adorable, when suddenly she looked at me. That sure startled me. I think I actually jumped. but she didn't seem to mind at all as she said, Yeah, I have to give you this, don't I? Sorry. As she waved her hand to flick off the water, she plopped something into my hands. It was clearly some of those fugashi snacks. Not the plastic wrapped, store-bought kind, but the type you'd find at a little candy shop run by some old lady. They were all different sizes and shapes. I looked back at the girl with this awful half smile like, what the heck would I do with this? She seemed confused too, but not as much as I was. I want to trade you for something. Pardon? A trade, like an exchange. Please? Anything's good. This conversation barely counted as a conversation. But as we talked, the girl was still shaking water off her hands, but focusing on the conversation must have distracted her. It was like something suddenly occurred to her, and she shook her hand right into the telephone pole hard, and part of it ripped clean off with a bang. The concrete exploded like a shotgun shot. Not like I'd ever seen a shotgun, though. The flakes of the concrete made dents in the wall of the library. Thunk, thunk. The girl looked back and forth between the telephone pole and the wall with an expression on her face like, oh crap. I looked at her and I don't know. At any rate, I was surprised, and I guess kind of glad too. It was the first time in my 10 odd years of life that a manga scene had happened to me. Thinking about it now, I suppose I was really happy about it. I jumped on that as hard as I could. I think my eyes were probably sparkling. Are you an Esper? Mutant? Superpowered? A visitor? Alien? Superhuman? Cyborg? Robot? Dimensional traveler? The chosen one? A god? Experimental subject? Sorcerer? A different species? Pardon? Super soldier? Immortal? An awakened being? An apostle? Divine vassal? Ninja? Magical girl? Huh? How did you know I'm a magical girl? Magical girl? You're a magical girl, huh? Oh, well, please, I won't tell anyone. So could you please tell me your story? I was so enthusiastic about it. I don't really know if I was grabbing her or begging her. I doubt I'd ever been that hungry for anything in my life. I didn't want my first manga-like experience to end there. I was just totally single-mindedly desperate for this. It really is a secret, she said, and she told me her situation. The girl's name was Blue Comet. That's an awesome name. Well, it's kind of like a stage name. I had thought magical girls were only fiction, and now that I'd found out they were real, my heart was fluttering hard as I listened to her story. Blue Comet was being tested to see if she was qualified to inherit the name of her teacher, Lapis Lazuli. The test was for her to help people in trouble around town and make trades with those people until she could upgrade what she had into something better. If she could get a hold of an amazing item that would satisfy her master, she hadn't been told precisely what would qualify. By the end of the day, she would pass the test. Listening to her explain this stuff so politely to me, I was sure she was the real deal. If I missed this chance, I'd never get another one. I'd live a good life or a bad one, and it'd end without any wondrous or fantastical experiences. No matter how good or bad my life turned out, I knew I'd be ordinary. Blue Comet. Yeah? For doing a trade, then take this. I took my fountain pen out of my bag and showed her. I bought it with my New Year's money that year. I think it cost about 5,000 yen. It was pretty comfortable to use, and it was super valuable to me. But if this was the price I had to pay for a taste of real wonder, I wasn't going to skimp. I offered what was probably the most expensive item I owned to this girl. Oh, that's a full rank up from Fugashi snacks. Thanks so much. She reached out to take it, but I pulled the fountain pen back, bringing it to my chest. So, there's one thing I want to ask of you. What is it? I'll trade this item with you. So in exchange, could I go with you? I was sure she'd say no. While I was thinking about how to complain when she did, she actually agreed. If that's your condition for the trade, I've got no choice then.
I called my mother to tell her that a friend's parents were off at some relative's funeral, so I decided to stay over to hang out and study. I've basically always been a straight-laced daughter, so I don't think she was suspicious of me. And I got Blue Comet to pretend to be my friend and talk on the phone. I was a little uneasy about that, since her casual, "Hey, sup?" greeting was not like anything a friend of mine would say. "Oh yeah," Blue Comet said then. "I ain't asked you your name, huh?" "Oh, it's Miharu Yatsu." "Oh, Miharu-chi, eh? Chi? If a name ends in Ryu, you add Chi. If it ends in Ko, then Chan, right? When it ends in Yo, you end it with Shi." Frankly, I didn't really understand what she was talking about, but it made it look like I did and nodded. I mean, I didn't even get what magical girls were in the first place. Maybe the real thing wasn't what I was familiar with, so I thought, oh, so this is a magical girl rule. Magical girls are really mysterious. I could catch up with her eventually if I pedaled my bicycle as hard as I could, but I think I was slowing her down anyway. She would stop and glance back at me with a look that said, "You coming?" She seemed like she felt sorry for me, like, sucks at bicycles, can't climb up telephone poles or get on roofs, huh? I was wondering how she tracked down people who were in trouble, so I asked. "My intuition tells me, you know. It's like, oh, I think there's one around here," she answered vaguely. And maybe she really did have an amazing intuition. She pointed in one direction and then kept on running that way for 15 minutes. In front of this little train station, there was an old woman talking with this white guy who looked like he was a backpacker. The old lady was tiny and the white guy was kind of scary. He was 2 heads taller than me and his voice was loud too. He was trying to complain about something, but the old woman didn't seem to understand and was just confused. A bunch of people around were watching, but all they did was give concerned looks, and nobody came in to help. Blue Comet zipped in between them and started talking to the guy. Well, it was more like they were talking. Or it was less like they were talking and more like, I don't know. It was baffling. Like they were both speaking two totally different languages, but for some reason they could communicate. Pointing to the ticket vending machine, pointing to the railway platform. And then at the end, the 2 of them smiled and hugged. And the foreign guy cheerfully waved at her as he disappeared, heading off to the platform. What was that? He didn't know how to get to the station he wanted, so I gave him directions. Did you understand what he was saying? Nope, not at all, but, well, my intuition just gives me a sort of vague idea. Her intuition? Is this a power magical girls have? Blue Comet told the old lady what was up, keeping the important part secret. The old lady was like, "Kids these days play such interesting games." I traded the fountain pen for her handkerchief. It was a white one with elegant violets embroidered on it. It looked pretty expensive. After that, Blue Comet kept on trading up from one item to the next. She ran up buildings like da-da-da-da. Yeah, she wasn't climbing them, she was running up them. She'd zip on up and then zoom. She'd vanish only to zoom, appear again in search of people in trouble. It took everything I had just to keep up with her. For a fussy kid who refused to budge, she sketched up an illustration of a character and gave it to them as a present. Then she did a spoon-bending trick. I think what actually happened there is that she was just crazy strong, but she stopped the kid from crying. "You're good at drawing, huh?" I said to her. "Well, a magical girl can't make her living just by being a magical girl. My master said if you learn a skill, then you'll be set at times when you need it." Get some water. When she ran into an office worker struggling in the bathroom because she couldn't figure out how to do her makeup properly, when she had to hurry to make it into a mixer,
make it to a mixer, Blue Comet put together a new look in a flash. I saw what the lady looked like before, so I can say this. She was like a different person. Like way too pretty. I mean, it was practically fraud. The lady seemed touched. You're good at makeup too, huh? I said. Even when you're transformed into a magical girl, your real face kind of shows through. So I've got to hide it with makeup, or you could figure out my true identity. That's another something my master taught me. A couple of guys came to try to pick us up. Both of them had really bright colored hair. That was exciting in a different sort of way than mystical, fantastical stuff. I didn't even know any girls in my class who'd gotten hit on in the street. Maybe partly because I went to the straight-laced private school, or maybe because middle school is too early for that, I think. I was wondering, does getting picked up count as helping people? But the two guys were like, let's hang out, just for a little while, and think of it like you're helping us out. Blue Comet was stoked about this, like, if this is helping out, then I gotta do it. And she pulled me by the hand to karaoke. It was the first time I've ever gone to karaoke without an adult, so I was so tense. I don't remember what I sang or how. I just tried to fill the time by eating pizza and pasta. Blue Comet guzzled down drinks, forcing the guys to keep up with her as they sang hard. Before I knew it, the two guys were so drunk that they were nearly ready to pass out. When Blue Comet said she wanted to make a trade, one guy offered the silver, dully shining chain. I guess you'd call that stuff sterling silver? So he held that out to her, and then in less than 5 minutes he was lying on the sofa, snoring loudly. Toxins generally don't work on us, so no matter how much I drink, I won't get drunk. Oh. And if you sing while you drink, you get drunk faster. My master taught me that drinking someone down like this and then taking them home is... Oh, I'm not doing it this time, you know. This is for when there's someone you're really into. Oh. What sort of master is this? Probably no one good. Compared with that, I think grabbing the collar of a little kid who thoughtlessly hopped into a traffic on his way back from cram school to save him was more respectable. Before I could even think, she'd already done it. She was so fast, I couldn't see her. Our spinal reflexes are faster and can do way more than normal humans. And if you train it up, you can make it so that when the time comes, you can act fast. Or so my master said. That's pretty amazing. Apparently, if you master it, you move even without thinking about it. My master said that if your brain stops completely, you can move just a little. I think she was joking, though. When Blue Comet made that kid stop crying, she'd exchanged the handkerchief for a scarf from the kid's mother. And when she did the lady's makeup, she swapped the scarf for earrings. And when they sang karaoke and ate and drank, she got the silver chain for the earrings. Then she'd saved this elementary schooler. There was no way a kid on the way home from cram school would have anything good, right? But she had to trade with him, so she gave the kid a silver chain and got a tiny doll in exchange. It was a figure of a character from a shonen manga. One of those things you get with ramen candy. Basically a cheap toy. Ultimately, I'd find out about this game because of the Fugashi. Then I'd gotten involved, so I guess it's appropriate that we ended up with a toy that comes with candy, sorta. The kid seemed happy about the silver chain, though. He was like, "This is so cool! Awesome!" Well, we'd spent all that time gradually getting better items, only to jump right back to square one, basically. It was already pretty late at night. My cell phone displayed the time 10:30. Right when I was thinking, if she starts over now, will she make it on time? Blue Comet broke into a run. "Hey!" I said. "What is it?" "I've got a feeling there's something good over this way." I stubbornly pedaled away on my bicycle. Blue Comet was probably slowing down for me, but I still had a hard time keeping up. I was out of breath and pushing my thighs, and I was bound to be in pain the next day. I'm not sure how far she ran, but before I knew it, we were out of the downtown area, and as the streetlights thinned, we came to a place where you'd be more likely to hear stray dogs howling than people talking. Here and there, the asphalt had peeled away, so it wasn't a good place to be riding a bicycle after dark. I got off my bicycle right about the same moment Blue Comet stopped. And I think it was less than a minute after that when the man stepped out of the shadow of the building. I was startled. He inched back without even thinking. The man's head was shaved, and he wore a black suit, gold and silver striped necktie, and a deep red shirt. Basically, like he was on the wrong side of the law. And considering where we were, it didn't seem like he could be anything else. The man approached Blue Comet seemingly without hesitation. Seeing him up close, his suit looked ready to burst. He was bulging with muscles, and I trembled by myself, wondering who would be able to stop him if he lost it.
Are you the magical girl?
His voice sounded no less threatening than I'd assumed. Yep, said Blue Comet.
Is that so? It's a little early for our appointment, but it helps me out that you're early.
Glad to be helpful, 'cause helping people is my business, Blue Comet replied cheerfully, as if she didn't acknowledge him as a scary person. The scary guy's shoulders shook with muffled laughter.
I like that. Yeah, your business is helping people, I guess. Heard your calling card was a doll, though.
I do have a doll. When Blue Comet showed him the character figure from the candy pack she'd just gotten from the elementary school kid, the scary-looking guy muttered,
A puppet master, huh?
I nodded twice, then handed over a Duralumin case.
I've told the master of your request. The request is just what you asked for. If you need to convert it to cash, feel free to do it yourself.
Oh, I can't take cash.
Well, now you have it.
Still facing us, the scary-looking man was about to shuffle off backward when Blue Comet called out, Hold on! I'll be in trouble if you don't take this doll.
I don't need it.
You said I helped you out, didn't you?
Yeah, you did.
And we trade. That's the rule.
Is that so? I ain't really following, though.
Glaring at the toy with a serious expression, just as he had when he'd come out, the scary-looking guy disappeared into the shadow of the building. Actually, I think he was more than scary-looking. Scary-looking. The whole time I watched the scary guy disappeared, I'd been holding my breath, even though I was totally out of breath from all that constant cycling. Was that someone you know? Nope, total stranger. The Duralumin case was not locked. When Blue Comet opened it, there was a soft-looking wine red cloth spread inside. The center of the 8 protrusions firmly held a gem. Yes, it was a gem. Just as I was finally able to breathe, my breath was taken away again. The stone was blue, about the size of a baby's fist, and cut beautifully. Well, there's no way it was real, right? I mean, how much would that even be worth? Or maybe depending on the stone, even a big one could be cheap, I guess. I don't know a lot about gems, though, so I have no idea. Blue Comet gently shut the lid of the Duralumin case and extended her hand to me. I kind of vaguely shook back, but maybe what she'd wanted was a high five. I remembered clearly how soft her palm was. Mission complete! This'll be enough to satisfy my master. Congratulations! I thought for sure she was going to fail, but the way she just forced her way to success at the end was like, I don't know. Maybe that's what magical girls are all about. That was the end of my mysterious, fantastical experience. After that, me and Blue Comet went to an always open family restaurant to eat and chat. It was fun, but it wasn't a very mysterious or fantastical ending. I haven't had any mysterious experiences since that day. Good things have happened, like I managed to pass the entrance exams for the school I wanted into, but I don't have a boyfriend, no. I still feel like I'd like to become a magical girl. I mean, she really seemed like she was having so much fun being one, but it must be hard. I wonder which is harder, that or getting a boyfriend. So then huh? What was I just talking about? Okay, there's one last part of the story, but I just wanted to say the character that was interacting with Blue Comet was
played by our headmate Felicity. Letting her white streaked hair down to her back, she passed her arms through her deep green jacket. The middle-aged woman left the cafe, the automatic door whirring shut behind her. She folded her arms, then raised them up above her head, still folded to stretch her back. You could hear it cracking.
Hey, hey, master!
The woman glanced to her side to look at the girl in a school uniform. Her eyes seemed to sparkle with expectation.
Was it a good idea to erase her memories?
Those memories of hers you read were everything based on what she told us, right?
Yeah.
Then it's best to erase them. The master began walking through the commercial district, where closed shutters called some attention to themselves. The girl followed after her.
Won't be sad if nobody remembers the second anymore?
Don't you bother with that sentimentality. You don't want the second's misconduct to be adversely affecting you when you're about to become the third, do you? It seems to me as if she was lacking when it came to trying to hide her true identity. She didn't get the idea that a magical girl should keep herself secret and out of view.
Isn't that because the way you taught her?
Yes, that might be the case. And so to avoid incurring the censure of the magical kingdom, I really do have to erase the girl's memories of Blue Comet.
I don't know.
I do. The master stopped walking and turned back to the girl. The way her eyes drooped seemed sad. The way the corners of her mouth lifted made her seem glad, too. Wearing that expression, she said this. Everyone else may forget, but I will remember that girl. That's good enough, isn't it? No. And we are on the final story, and it's a little bit shorter one, too. There are major spoilers for Magical Girl Racing Project Restart with this story. So if you're planning on watching the anime that's coming up, I would suggest skipping out. But if you don't mind, and well, you're welcome to stay, of course. The story is set immediately after the game in Magical Girl Racing Project Restart ends. Oh, it's called Clan Tales Friends. She got out of the bath, scrubbing at her hair with a towel as she checked her magical phone to find she'd received a message from the Magical Kingdom. It said they wanted her to measure her height and weight before and after transforming into a magical girl and reply with that information. They said they were putting together statistics on differences in physique before and after transforming. She'd been getting a lot of messages like this lately. Someone had told her that since there were a lot of magical girls causing problems, the Magical Kingdom would just pretend to check on them by sending them pointless messages. She got the feeling it was Flea who had told her this, but maybe it was Shadowgale. She was really bad at remembering who said what. Either way, Nene Ono wondered what a magical girl should do if her height and weight did indeed vary. While she blow-dried her hair, she reread the message. Nene, make sure to not catch a chill after your bath. I know. Someone called from outside the bathroom, and Nene replied as she reread the message one more time. If this message was just for show, then they probably didn't care about getting anything that accurate. So then it should be fine to just send them the measurements of her most standard transformation, the pony. But when she considered the negative effects a careless reply could have on the statistics, it seemed less fine. So should she record the two extremes of her sizes and compose a reply that referenced the possibilities, like height between 3 and 35 feet. But if they were putting together statistics, that could change the numbers too. So maybe she should measure the size of each and every animal she could transform into, calculate the average, and send that information to them? She really didn't know what to do.
Nay, nay, if you're done with the hair dryer, then put it back beside the washing machine. I will.
Maybe the best answer was a reply asking what she should do. But wouldn't that irritate them? If these messages weren't genuine, what if they got annoyed at her for overthinking it? Troubles like this constantly plagued Nene. People might tell her to read between the lines, but how were you supposed to read something you couldn't see? Lots of people thought she liked animals, but she wasn't actually that obsessed with them. She just saw them as normal. At the end of the day, she found them all average, both the ones people tend to hate, like spiders, centipedes, cockroaches, and earthworms, and the cute ones, like dogs and cats. It seemed that as other people saw it, simply approaching them all equally made it look as if she loved them. She sat down in her chair and looked around the room at all the stuffed animals, spiders, snakes, and other things that overflowed her dresser and bookshelves. She hadn't bought all this. Her parents had it in their heads that she liked such creatures, so every time they found a stuffed animal, they would buy it for her, and that's how her room had ended up in this state, not because she had a special love for them.
Nay, nay, which would you rather have for dinner? Taro stemp with kasujiro soup, or nozawana greens with kasujiro soup? Nozawana.
But maybe she did love animals, relatively speaking, compared with how she felt about humans. She clearly wasn't good with people. First of all, she had a bad memory for faces. Everyone in the same age group all looked the same. And once people found out she didn't remember them, they'd get offended. What's more, she'd often stuck her foot in her mouth and upset people. Because of that, she figured it was best to just say nothing. But it wasn't. Others would call her unsociable and get mad about that, over that instead. Nene meant well and acted with good intentions, but it was not taken that way. Being around people was hard. She lived with her parents for 14 years, and she couldn't reach a complete understanding with them. And even her father and mother, who had been together since before she was born, didn't understand each other perfectly. They often butted heads over whether some comedian was boring or funny, or some actress was beautiful or not. Fortunately, this didn't seem to mean their relationship was a bad one. Being with animals was more comfortable. Nene understood the idiosyncrasies of each and every one of the neighborhood stray cats, including where they liked to be petted. She could even see the individuality in the spiders in her yard, from their color, gloss, size, and shape of their webs. You couldn't do this with humans. It was only just recently that Nene had made her first human friends. In the game, she just behaved the same as she always did, but she must have appeared taciturn and calm, since the role of the leader had been thrust upon her. Commanding a group had been very difficult, painful, and scary, and none of her memories of it were good. But it had also been fun, and remembering the good times made her sad. Back then, she turned her sadness into anger. She'd had to, or she surely would have lost. Now she couldn't do that anymore.
Nay, dinner will be done in 5 minutes. Okay.
Nene wondered if maybe she wouldn't be able to make any more human friends. Currently, her candidates for new friends were Flea and Shadowgale, but she couldn't help feeling that when she'd met them the other day, she'd made Shadowgale angry. On that day, Nene noticed that Shadowgale had black lines drawn around her eyes with a magic marker, like glasses rims. Nene had stared at her, wondering what the heck it was, which had probably hurt Shadowgale. She couldn't help feeling that her new friend had been in a bad mood the whole day. In the end, even if she avoided saying anything, her thoughts would show on her face, even though she wasn't exactly in any place to be complaining about someone's fashion sense. If only I were the kind of person who would speak more, well, tactfully, or be more tactful, she thought. But she also figured that this was the sort of person she was. She didn't like being such a worrywart, but without this anxiety, she wouldn't be herself, she was sure. If Petchka were there, what would she say? She would cook for her, most definitely. Petchka had known that was the most comforting thing. Nonoko would have laughed it off, while Briganetta would perhaps have said something snarky.
My, how unpleasant.
The magical phone in her hand rang. Shadowgale was calling. Nene had only just been feeling bad about her, so she was a little startled but answered anyway. Were they going to have a meeting about their grave visits?
Can I come over right now? Shadowgale burst out without so much as a greeting.
She sounded intense. She rattled on.
I just can't take living in close quarters with someone like her anymore. I don't want to see her face right now. Can you believe this? She just said she did it because it got interesting reactions out of people. And that prank went on for over a week, you know? Scribbling on my face. She's not a little kid. She devised all these schemes to make sure I'd never once find out, stealing away any opportunity I'd have to look in the mirror or erasing the scribbles right before I looked. And when I finally noticed and got mad at her, she was like, "You're so immature, Mamori." Damn it. Just remembering it makes me mad. I refuse to live with that devil anymore. I've made up my mind to live as a human being. That jerk-ass. I'm so sorry to cause you any trouble, but could I possibly ask this favor from you? Even for just a few days. I'll take the time to come up with what to do next, somehow. I'm honestly very sorry. You're the only person I know who I don't think would report me to that fiend. You're the only person I can count on.
I'll be waiting.
Thank you. I'm in your debt. I'm coming right away.
Nene hung up the phone. Flea and Shadowgale were really close.
Nene, dinner!
Coming.
Figured she'd have to tell her parents she had a friend coming. Nene rose from her chair. Her mother must have thought she didn't have any. She imagined her surprise when she saw her daughter had a friend from school coming over. It wasn't bad. And now we just have the author's notes. Afterward. Heya! Hello. It's been a long time. This is Endo. I switched things up this time by doing some short stories. Yes, this is my first collection of short stories. It's 15 treats for the price of 1. There have been some edits and such made, so it's different from the stories that were posted online. Comparing the two might be a little entertaining for you. I hope you enjoy the exploits of these 33 magical girls. Yes, 33. That's the number of people you need for a tournament if you count one as a reserve player or have her barge in halfway through the games, or you could make her a commentator or judge, depending on the character. Perhaps first aid responder or a ring girl would work. But anyway, when you have this many characters, you start off with starring the whole cast of magical girls and add in the fun tagline, "You don't need a huge novel for this," as you bring out all the characters within your allotted page count. The idea of making all 33 magical girls appear was suggested to me as I was close to the final stages of writing these short stories. I was feeling casual about this, thinking, it'll be a blast, lots of fun, yeah, let's do this. But it was actually really hard. 33 characters is basically twice the normal number. Even if I didn't have to kill anyone, it's not an insubstantial number of people. It's so many, even the great samurai Mataiman Araki would collapse with exhaustion before he could finish. So I asked my editor, Asmara-san, can I cut out after the afterword? I don't think I could fit all 33 in there. Please don't cut off the afterword. But I don't have enough pages, so just put them in the afterword, lol. Asmara-san granted me the rare honor of most distinctly feeling the LOL in a real-life conversation. Asmara-san, thank you very much. Monotone. Fortunately, it turned out that no poor magical girl was forced into the afterword for the sake of meeting a quota. Thank you, magical girls.
I have one announcement. Aside from the short stories in this book, I have a short story called Short Story in commemoration of the short story collection release, which seems like it would cause this term short story to lose all meaning, and the plan is for it to be published on the monthly Konorano section of the official site of Konorano Publishing, soon after this is released. Unfortunately, due to circumstances with page count, this story, which stars Ripple and Snow White, has been pushed out. It's long compared with these other short stories, so I hope that makes it just that much more substantial reading. Please do read it. To everyone at the editing department who's given me guidance, and to Esmer-san, who even showed concern over my stomach and throat because I got myself sick somehow. Perhaps reading this afterward will make that seem less believable, but seriously, really, thank you so much. Marui no Sensei, thank you so much. I know I placed a particularly unusual burden on you this time around, but the illustration of Detect Bell, I'll show that now, actually. The illustration of Detect Bell and Lapis Lazuli in switching costumes made me pump a fist. And it's got Churna Mouse too, so the whole party is there, huh? I think the other girl has gone transparent and is hanging around the center of the illustration. And finally, to all my readers, thank you very much for buying this book. Please wait just a little while for further developments. And it says, thank you very much for even looking at this part. These days, I kind of want a palm-sized Churna post-transformation. I want her to break into my house while I cry, "You failed, Churna." Thank you very much. This volume has lots of stars in it. Marui no. We made it to the very end of book 4. And Justin too. Here we go. Thank you once again for joining me and reading through all of Magical Girl Erasing Project. It'll be a while before I continue. I do this every third stream, but I'm actually going to do it on my 4th stream because this week I'm going to play through Sonic 06. I'm looking forward to that. Yes, I'll play through Sonic 06 this Friday. I'll see if I can finish through Sonic's story, but it might take a couple streams, we'll see. And then I'll do a couple Pokemon streams, and then I'll come back to Magical Girl Racing Project with Book 5, Limited. So our schedule for this week, our next stream is Tuesday night at 11 p.m. EST with Tarsi doing a Yin Yang Yo watch party and Snuggle doing a little Animal Crossing before that. And Wednesday at 2 p.m. EST, Snuggle is going to do a kind of a class. They're going to color and rig a model for a live 2D model. So it will be like a tutorial of sorts. Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. No. And then Friday at 2 p.m. EST is my Sonic 06 stream. And then Saturday, 9 p.m. EST, Magma is playing Dark Deception. Is that it? It's like 3 dark games that we mix up. I think that's what it's called. Yes, Dark Deception. And he's probably going to play a little bit of Binding of Isaac after that too. And then Sunday at 2 p.m. EST, Cuddle is going to play Spyro 3. I'm going to play Original and Reignited back-to-back comparisons.
we are looking forward to all of our streams. I'm going to raid Drapesy. Drapesy is playing a Raid Shadow Legends. Wait. That might be a joke. It looks more like they're just doing like a chill, just chatting thing. Maybe. Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to raid Drapesy. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. We look forward to seeing you next time as always. Please take care of yourself. I love you very much.